At my meeting yesterday, we had a vote on where to get lunch.
If it looks like I'm not paying attention, I assure you it's just an optical illusion caused by me not caring about what you had for lunch yesterday.
Do people think you're witty?
Always, when they want something from me.
Anyway, the 7 of us voted, and pizza won with a plurality of 3 votes.
Fascinating. Care to speculate on the eschatological subtext of that choice?
Well, at least you think you're witty. The interesting part is that the 4 people who voted for things other than pizza really didn't want pizza, so they immediately started complaining, especially Tuan, who's lactose intolerant. So I suggested that we revote. This time, we would rank our lunch preferences 1 through 4. Each lunch option would receive 1 point each time it was mentioned, plus 1 point for each lunch item ranked below it. In theory, this would make it more likely we would select something everyone is okay with, instead of something some people love and other people hate.
Congratulations! You just became the 1 millionth person to discover ranked choice voting. You can claim your prize at the counter near the exit. It's a sticker that says, "I can tie my shoes all by myself."
You're missing my point. Or maybe you're making my point. Yeah, you're making my point. The point is that it was easy and intuitive to vote this way, and doing so made us happier than we otherwise would have been.
That wasn't my point. My point was that you're taking too long to tell a simple story about how little you knew about voting before your grand revelation yesterday.
Exactly. I didn't even think about this sort of thing until yesterday. To me, even though I've used Borda and other ranked choice voting systems before, voting has been synonymous with the first-past-the-post systems that we use in political elections. But Borda is better. So my grand revelation wasn't that we could amicably vote on what to get for lunch. It was being dumbfounded that we've continued to use first-past-the-post for hundreds of years while simple, superior alternatives are available.
Borda has problems. It encourages people to misrepresent their preferences almost as badly as first-past-the-post, which I prefer to call plurality for brevity.
Plurality and first-past-the-post have the same number of syllables.
Yes, but plurality has fewer plosives when spoken and fewer hyphens when typed.
How many plosives are in the word persnickety?
3.
Anyway, I agree. Borda does have problems. Fortunately, there are other ranked choice voting systems we can choose from. There's instant runoff, Condorcet, and range, as well as subsets of each and a few truly strange options.
And each of those systems has its own problems as well. There is no perfect voting system.
Have you heard the phrase, "the perfect is the enemy of the good"? A system doesn't need to be perfect for it to be an improvement, and all ranked choice systems are improvements over plurality.
In your opinion?
Not just my opinion. Their superiority can be quantified.
So can the number of angels able to dance on the head of a pin.
Don't fear what you don't understand. I was as surprised as you are. When I was researching different voting systems last night, I wound up reading mathematics papers. It turns out that, by starting with a population with known candidate preferences, we can establish what an ideal outcome would be and measure the deviation between that ideal outcome and the actual outcome of various voting systems. This measure is called Bayesian regret, and the math gets complicated, but it's a standard method with utility beyond this narrow application.
Do we measure this by running simulations of elections?
Yep, millions upon millions of them.
And these ranked choice systems are all better at minimizing Bayesian regret than plurality.
Well, kind of. It turns out that every voting system tends to encourage people to lie about their preferences, including ranked choice voting. Lying like that is called strategic voting. The research shows that strategic voting in instant runoff and Condorcet votes can lead to outcomes just as bad as in plurality.
This must be why my mother told me not to lie, to minimize my Bayesian regret.
Naturally. Anyway, the research conclusively shows that range voting is the best system.
What's range voting?
Instead of ranking your choices in order, you give each candidate a numerical value between 0 and 99, and the candidate with the highest average value wins the election.
Good lord, that sounds terrible.
Really?
Well, first of all, if a minority of the population has an incredibly strong preference for a particular candidate, there's a chance that their candidate could end up with the highest average score. That completely undermines majority rule.
That's not a bug, that's a feature. Range voting moves beyond majority rule.
When you say that, it sounds like you're trying to overturn millennia of democratic principles.
Look, if it makes you feel any better, for large enough populations, it becomes functionally impossible for a candidate to win without an above-average score on a plurality of ballots. But, more importantly, range voting isn't trying to say that the purpose of an election is to establish majority rule. It's saying that the purpose of an election is to minimize the population's Bayesian regret. That is to say, Find the candidate who maximizes the total happiness of the population. Can we really say that goal is less worthy than majority rule?
I see your point. Regardless, there's a more fundamental difficulty. Do you remember our discussion about David Dunning and his eponymous effect?
Yep.
So, you remember that people are really bad at making informed choices about which candidates to support?
Yep.
So, do you think that maybe, just maybe, people might have trouble distinguishing between a candidate they like for 60 units and another they might like for 70 units?
Huh. When you put it that way, it does seem a bit implausible. With enough people voting, though, the noise should even out. Maybe you put 70, but you should have put 75? Well, maybe another guy put 30 when he should have put 25. As long as the variation is random, it's fine.
Did any of those mathematics papers you read prove the variation is random?
No.
See? There you have it.
You're doing a good job of explaining why range voting isn't perfect, but you haven't made any positive argument that plurality voting is better.
Well, yes, but a stubborn old man like me isn't going to be excited about changing the way he votes for mere incremental improvement. Have you heard the one about old dogs and new tricks?
I'm disappointed in you. I always thought you were a bit better than a dog. A maned wolf, at least.
It does pain me to disappoint you.
Do you think my lunch yesterday turned out better than it would have if we had used plurality voting?
It did.
Well then, clearly using a different voting system was worthwhile. And that was for lunch. It disappeared in half an hour. Right now, we're using a demonstrably inferior voting system to determine which person knows the nuclear launch codes every 4 years. Don't you think that maybe improving the way we choose that person is worth doing?
You're using nuclear weapons in your example to get back at me for my crack about eschatology, aren't you?
See, I knew you were clever. Are you clever enough to understand that using range voting is absolutely worth the trouble, even if you're old?
I'm beginning to think so.
Good boy.
And now we're back to dog jokes. Thanks for that.
Anything for you, old friend. Until next time.